All right, we are back, and now we've got our guest for today, Mike Thunder Phillips. And you got a couple of Substacks. So the first thing is spell them out. If somebody wants to check out your stuff, where do they go?
It's been a problem. I've got, yeah, as you said, too many Substacks, but I've been consolidating everything. You can go to thunderreport.org and you can see everything consolidated that I've been writing. But otherwise, on Substack, you can find me at Father and Co. or
Mhm.
at I guess it's MikeThunderPhillips.substack.com. So
All right.
those are my two main Substacks, and then find me on Medium.
Okay. And you write, we're going to primarily talk about some of the like high profile child custody cases you've been writing about. However, you've been writing about a divorce slash child custody, and they're divorced now, but that I've also written about. So let's start with that. I've got you've written a lot about this. I just picked one of the articles, but Jeff Reichert, um, why are you writing about him? What do you think is important that people should know about Jeff's case?
Well, excuse me. Um, why I'm writing about Jeff? I guess I came across him, and we started talking a bit, and just learned that both of our cases are in Maryland, and so
Mhm.
that's one of the things that was at the top of his list. And reaching out is that we both can relate, because I also have a child custody case going on where I haven't seen my child in over a year and a half now, so not as long as Jeff's.
Mhm.
But we've been facing a lot of the same issues. I'd say that his issues are more pronounced. So the more I dug into his case, it's got so many elements to it. It's wild. I mean, it's more than a custody case. It's everything tying back to his career as an attorney, not knowing what connections are getting in the way, in terms of political connections, not knowing well, as the more I learn about the characters in this case, the players, um, certainly learn about his ex-wife Sarah, and learned about John Michael. That these are all attorneys with deep connections, deep political connections. Even within the current Maryland regime with Wes Moore, and then also with Larry Hogan. Jeff talks about going to law school with or being in the Army JAG with some of these guys, and so it goes deeper than what a normal custody case would be. But as I've been digging in and writing about child custody, um, you see all the elements. What you could jump out and say is a broken system, whether it's corruption involved, or when you talk about judicial discretion and whether or not their discretion is biased, and learning that it's not a system of law, that it's an administrative system, and it allows for just way too many fluid decisions in a child custody case. So when you combine already the issues of a normal child custody case that I'm facing, and then add in these other elements of Jeff's life, that is it's like high profile. He's as high profile as you could be without being a celebrity. He's got all of the same issues because he's dealt with a lot of high profile people. And so it's the complexities of the case that makes it real interesting. But
I think
um
you're right. There's an enormous amount of corruption, but the system, the the brokenness of the system is what's allowing for these powerful people. And there's clearly powerful people behind the scenes. His case, they were married for like 18 months. I think she pulled a knife on him or a gun in their honeymoon. So obviously a really good marriage. Their custody case started almost as soon as their son was born. It lasted for approximately a decade. Sarah, his ex-wife, had a series of not mishaps. I can't think of a good word, but like driving drunk or taking care of your kids and getting drunk and passing out. That sort of
Crashing.
mishap. Right.
Yeah.
Mishaps of that nature. As a result, the two of them entered into a consent agreement where Jeff would have basically sole custody. She'd only have supervised visits and as Jeff has mentioned many times, very importantly, a rider in there that said if there's any dispute, we go to a mediator. It's supposed to be kept out of court. She somehow files one frivolous protective order application after another and uses that to switch custody. His son is on video saying, "No, I want to live with my dad." He's on video saying it as they had their custody trial, which doesn't even make sense because they'd already gone through the custody process and they switched custody. They've kept Jeff away. Um, Someone who was raising his son is now completely out of his son's life. And you're right, that doesn't just happen. Someone's pulling the strings. But you're also right that it's easy for someone to pull the strings with a system like we have. What you say that your case was similar. What give like in bullet points? What's some similarities between your case and Jeff's case?
Well, my custody case pretty much started not long after my son was born. It started. It also involved false protective orders, and so I've been dealing with those. And it's that feeling of when you feel like you're a good person, you feel like you try to do good by people. When you feel like an empath, you've not been a person who breaks the law. You don't feel like you've been an abuser. You just feel like you're a good person. And similar to Jeff, I think the more I've gotten to know Jeff, I think Jeff has a good soul. He's a good person. But
Mhm.
going into the court system, that narrative, it doesn't take much. It doesn't take evidence. It doesn't take facts to flip that script and to villainize you, to turn you into a monster. And then once that narrative is set, it's like impossible to undo. And so now my case is now stretched. My son is 6 years old,
Mhm.
and so this has been going on pretty much his whole life. And I'm still fighting through these same issues, trying to undo this false narrative, trying to fight for my son, and also these biased, definitely unbalanced, unfair decisions where I
Mhm.
could come in just like Jeff does with a boatload of evidence showing videos. He's got those videos, the interviews you're talking about with was it Wayne
Dolcefino,
Dolcefino?
right?
So I've watched those and I don't my son's only 6. I'm not going to get him on an interview, but the last time I saw him was at a pediatrician appointment a couple months ago, and that's like the only time I've seen him in like the past year. And seeing his emotions, that he wouldn't let go of me, that the things he's saying made me think of Grant talking in that video, that it's like I want to be with my dad. I love my dad. I miss my dad.
Right.
And when you take that,
None of these people are doing it for Grant's best interest. Grant is a pawn. They're playing in their minds 4D chess. It's 4D chess to them.
right,
What they're really doing is whatever. I don't know if they're lashing out. I don't think this is lashing out. I think that Jeff's a lawyer. And I wanted to ask you a question after this, but they're maneuvering the court case for their benefit, and Grant's well-being is not even secondary. It's not, it doesn't matter. Now, Jeff has pretty significant PTSD as a result of this. Do you think you've got PTSD as a result?
I've been diagnosed with PTSD. And Jeff too. It's not just the custody case. It's even before the custody case. The issues
Mhm.
that he dealt with his ex-wife. You brought up the honeymoon. I think it was actually shards of glass, and from hearing his story is that he went up to the bathroom to check on her, and she's throwing the glasses from the hotel at him against the wall, and it's shattering everywhere and cutting him open.
Mhm.
um
Mhm.
and it's like
This
you,
is
you
the
think
woman who has sole custody now.
it's
Crazy.
yeah. I mean,
Crazy.
I had I think it was the morning after my wedding. My ex was screaming at me saying, "You ruined our wedding." And I'm like, "How did I ruin our wedding? I think I remember watching you scream and yell at everybody who was working at the venue because everybody was doing something
Right.
wrong." I
Right.
walked around apologizing to everybody, like Jeff, we're peacemakers.
Mhm.
And and that's a very important thing. You bring up the PTSD, and it's an underdiagnosed um, element in US, not just in the courts, but CPTSD, so the complex part,
Mhm.
and that's definitely something that doesn't get factored into the courts. Is the trauma that's caused to people, and
They can't.
it
Can't.
becomes used against
If
you.
it can't, because the judges are the ones. they're giving you the PTSD. They can't acknowledge it because
but then
they
they
have to
weaponize
then
it.
acknowledge that.
There's two issues with that, and
Mhm.
I've talked about it a lot with Daubert and the analogy with brain scans. You have PTSD, PTSD. You have all these people making these diagnoses. You have people taking brain scans too. You need someone who is a qualified expert to be able to pass Daubert and to get it into the courts. Now, they are very, very liberal when it comes to personal injury cases and civil rights cases to show that as getting in. But for some reason, when the court moves over, when the judge moves over to the family term, it becomes almost impossible for anybody to get any of that evidence in the family court side. And it goes to say, what's the issue here? I think that one of the issues here, and the Jeff case, as an observer, I haven't interviewed Jeff, but as an observer here of someone who is a lawyer, a trial lawyer, that's the pure irony here, because the issue here is the trial lawyers creating a system of acrimony in the family courts, where in order to get paid, at the same time that they create a system that also gets them paid in personal injury and in tort courts and civil courts, but they look at evidence just exactly oppositely. Daubert is kind of thrown out the window in family court when it's the Bible for a personal injury lawyer with the same type of problems from an event, from a car accident, from something that they can recover from a personal injury case. That is one of the big ironies that I see here across the board. And Jeff is kind of the poster child for it because he's a lawyer himself. Yeah. They eat their own in family court.
So we've got one of your articles up. We're going to talk about some of the celebrity custody cases you covered. So Elon's got several custody cases, but you make the argument that even the world's richest man, which he is a lot of the time, has trouble getting a fair shake. Is that fair in custody? Is that what you're arguing here?
Yeah, a little bit. It's a case that it's hard to find all the information out there on it, but then it's what it seems. I mean, he's got and I guess in a way I was trying to put a little sarcastic spin to it as well, but I think of him as like the Philip Rivers of technology, that he's probably got enough kids that are all going to be the CEOs of his companies as soon as they're old enough. Like Philip Rivers will have enough kids to field a football team soon. But it's going through all these celebrity cases that yeah, they're not all necessarily getting a fair shake either. That's
All right, now let me challenge you on that. So this is an interview with his transgender now daughter, and she calls him a bad guy, but that's not relevant to this. But she said Wilson, that's his daughter, said that for as long as she could remember, Musk hasn't been a supportive father. She said he was rarely present in her life, leaving her and her siblings to be cared for by their mother or by nannies, even though Musk had joint custody. So it seems like he got a good deal. At least that's with his wife. So that's the first custody case. As far as Grimes, she said that she nearly went bankrupt trying to navigate the custody case. And she said that she didn't see one of her children for 5 months. So I would say that Elon Musk has gotten more than a fair shake. And given his history that he's not going to take care of his kids, besides financially, I don't know why he gets joint custody. And it's because he's rich. That's the only reason that he gets any kind of custody. He's not going to take care of those kids. He'll give them money. He likes the one son, and he, shows off with him at the White House, but he's not raising his kids.
Not anymore, though. Not at the White House anymore.
Right. Well, he likes the one kid, but I would say if any, and by the way, I looked into his custody case with Grimes. It's sealed. The reason you can't get any information is because they sealed it, and you don't get that. You don't get that. Only rich guys get that. So he doesn't want his personal business. I looked into Sergey Brin's custody case, and same thing. He sealed it. These rich guys, they do get special treatment. I would say in the case of Musk, if anything, he is being given the special treatment because of who he is, favorable to him, and he's not. He he's getting everything he wants and then some, and he shouldn't be because he's not raising any of those kids.
Well, anybody could file to seal their case. It's not a rich person. Well, I guess it depends what you define as rich. Because my ex makes a hell of a lot more money than I do or ever have, and I'm pretty sure most of our case files
Mhm.
are sealed, except for when I keep filing contempt against her. But there's because they're sealed, we don't really know everything. I mean, could it
Mhm.
be signs of parental alienation that his transgender daughter is saying those things? Maybe he wants to be a good father and he struggles to balance his life with everything. There's so many things that we don't know, and so I think my article remained high level for that reason. I didn't go too deep into things, but just trying to paint. I'm trying to paint the other side of what we typically see in the news, where celebrities are just automatically attacked and automatically assumed that they're maybe not interested in being parents, that they don't care.
Mike, you
That
said a buzzword for Senior Volpe. You said the word parental alienation.
Alienation.
What are
I
your
don't,
views on
I
that
don't,
can
term,
we get a daily
parental?
double?
Yeah,
right. I don't think that Elon really wants to be a parent besides providing financial support and showing up every once in a while and being a helicopter parent. So I think, there's no evidence that his daughter was lying about any of that stuff. So I would say in the case of Elon, if anything, he's gotten a favorable deal because of who he is. And yeah, it's true anyone can file to seal the case, but
Mhm.
it's not that simple to get a judge's order. And Elon got one. But you wrote about another one. I don't know who Post Malone is. Who is that? And then what happened in this custody case?
I mean, he's a musician with tattoos all over his face. That's pretty much what
All
most
right.
people know about him. But he's he's a guy. He's played the whole hip hop game, and now he's dabbling in country music, and he's a pretty popular music artist right now. Probably one of the most popular ones out there right now. But as far as his custody case, he so he has a daughter, and so him and his ex, they split up. He had bought property in Utah, and then I guess his ex at one point had moved back to Los Angeles.
Mhm.
And the big argument here really is who filed first. And the more I dug into it, it looks like Post Malone filed first in Utah. I want to say it was upwards like 2 weeks before she did in LA.
Mhm.
And then in Los Angeles, he
Who
was
got who?
I guess
Sometimes they go by who got served first. Do you know who got served first?
I'm pretty sure that she was served first. And the
And
latest
then, but
that
still, they gave her the jurisdiction in LA. Is that what you're saying?
nope, nope, nope. The jurisdiction, the latest I read is that based on how it happened, that jurisdiction is probably going to lean towards Utah to actually
Mhm.
favor Post Malone. And so the bigger, there's that issue of sometimes bias that comes up, that the woman a lot of times will people assume that she'll be favored. And so I think a lot of people just assumed that as a musician, he's lived in LA, and that this case is going to be in LA with the mother, because the mother has been living in LA with the child against Post Malone's wishes
Mhm.
for the past several months. And but what's coming
So
up is,
he's not able to get any kind of custody time yet.
well, it's probably the issue where she obtained an attorney, and then they infiltrated it and made a bigger mess than what it was.
Mhm.
And so right now
UCCJEA,
the big issue there is
Mike, right?
jurisdiction.
It's a UCCJEA argument now
Yeah.
about where the
Yeah,
center of litigation is or where the center of the children's lives are. That's what it's turned
right.
into.
Okay. All right. That actually sounds like an interesting case, but that seems like it's still
It
unfolding.
is, but all those things they still fall under 6 months. I think if it's less than
Right.
6 months, the child is still considered to be
That's
a
correct.
resident of where they last lived, and so that would
Right.
still be Utah.
Right. All right. So it seems like jurisdiction should be in Utah. Jurisdiction is very, very boring, but very, very important. All right. And you wrote about Kim Kardashian's custody case with Kanye. What did you find out about that case?
Well, really, with that, it's crazy. I didn't think I'd be doing custody stuff, pretending to be like I'm on TMZ. But the more I dig into Kanye, I mean, he's an
Do you think
interesting
he's a good
individual.
dad?
I think he's a dad that's being shut out. I think he's not getting a fair shake as a
Is he
father.
being shut out, or does he just like to gallivant in Europe and LA and everywhere except where his kids are?
Well, I think eventually you have to live your life because I'm pretty sure he has a house that neighbors
Hmm.
Kim Kardashian, or it's still in the neighborhood, so he could see his kids. So he has a home right near there, and I know he just filed a cease and desist letter telling her to stop denying his access to his children. So he's trying to be a father, but I think it's a celebrity status that is being used against him. Where I get Kim Kardashian's a celebrity too, um, but he's basically complaining that she's keeping him from having any access to the children, and so
Oh,
that's why their case continues to linger. And he might have more time in his hands if what I last read is he allegedly split with his latest wife. So who knows?
But
all right.
there are a lot of celebrities out there. There are a lot of sports stars, musicians, old people. I don't think there's anyone that said some of the crazy shit in plain English that Kanye said over the years. So don't you think that becomes a factor? But he's a celebrity, sure. But there are plenty of well-behaved celebrities. He's probably one of the worst-behaved celebrities based on the things that have come out of his own mouth.
Yeah, and I know exactly when it started to happen. I remember he seemed normal until his mother died years ago, and it was when his mom died is when all that crazy
Oh,
stuff started happening. So it's like you could tell that she was, more than anything, his rock. And it's like when he lost that rock years ago,
that's
um,
possible. I don't know enough
it's like a
about the
lost
case.
boy. It's like a lost soul. He doesn't. He probably has some childhood issues that are unresolved.
All right, it's possible. Dennis
Yeah.
Rodman, all of that started when he dated Madonna. Same craziness, but Madonna brought it out of him. I don't know enough about the case. My perception is he doesn't necessarily want to be that involved with dad, and it's easy to then complain in the media that you're not being a dad. But that's my perception. I definitely could be wrong about that. If you've got time, do you want to debate parental alienation?
Is this a dangerous thing to jump into? I
I,
don't know.
I've
Oh,
uh, I've
it's
debated it enough,
extremely
and it's
dangerous, and it's going to be fascinating, fascinating entertainment.
all right.
I'm
Well,
interested to
first of all,
learn.
it
I'm not.
sounds like you think you've been alienated. So, well, what do you think you've been alienated? But be more specific about what you mean by you've been alienated.
Well, I do think parental alienation is a term that's like Kleenex with tissues. It's become a general term that's easy to go to, and a lot of people do overuse it.
Hmm.
But I think I wouldn't say I wouldn't say that I'm completely alienated yet because when I saw my son, he still showed he wanted to be with me, he wants to love
No,
me, but I'm at risk
he's
of
sick.
parental alienation.
All right, he's
Um,
he's 6. So let me ask you: do you think a 6-year-old can be alienated, or are they too young that they don't understand hate yet, so they can't hate you? Do you think he could be alienated at his age, or does he have to be a little older than his age to even be alienated?
I think he could be, but I think what makes my case so hard is that my ex isn't like a called like an extroverted alienator. Like she's
Yeah.
not full on
Well, what is she?
like an overt. She's not an overt narcissist. Like she's not
Well, then what is
trying to.
she? What do you think she does to try? And I think the term you then be using, what are her alienating behaviors?
Well, for one, keeping me away from my child in the most important development years, and
Okay.
and at some point, when one parent's not there, the child does start to think, well, why does my dad not want to be here? Why is he not at my
Mhm.
practices? Why is he not at my games? Why is he not at school events?
Mhm.
Um, and eventually the child's going to start questioning the other parent. But I think my ex, when you think of like narcissistic behaviors,
Mhm.
I'm her target. I don't think my child's the target, so she's not going to necessarily feed all the negativity that she does with me or in the courtroom. She's not going to feed it privately to my son to make him think negatively about me. So the risk is there. Um, the longer that I'm away from him, that alienation will set in because eventually he's probably already getting used to me not being there. And eventually, resentment's going to grow. He's going to be like, Dad, you weren't in my life. Why weren't you there? Because he's not
Right,
going
but
to know
I
everything I
know
did fighting
people,
for him.
I know
But right,
people who are adults who didn't have their parent in their life, and then they made, once the parent showed up, they fixed the relationship. So I don't think that's like it's impossible. So
I've been
my
showing up everywhere
my
I've been.
my
Yeah,
biggest problem with the term, and first of all, if you're kept away from your child as you are, I would call that contact denial because that's a specific thing, and that's what contact, you're denied contact. So if you're being, I definitely think you are part of a very big basket of people who are going through a silent epidemic where you're not allowed to see your children either through a specious bogus court order or another parent who either there's no court order and they just don't care about the court order and the court doesn't seem to want to enforce it. I definitely believe that happens. I would just call
yeah.
it contact denial. But my biggest problem with parental alienation is it's so broad and vague and nebulous, opaque, that it's whatever you want it to be. So whatever is happening to someone, they then say it's parental alienation. You sort of mentioned it because you said
The whole
everybody's using it and
it's
it
overused. I'd
so
agree
it's
with you.
overused. So it's not that I don't believe you right now. It's that it, the term, everyone just uses it however they want. And to me, that has no meaning. Because if you describe what happened to you and they're like parental alienation, some other guys like, my ex-wife on Sundays makes him cocoa and I hate cocoa and now he hates me. And there's a parental alienation. If people hear 100 of those stories, they won't know what parental alienation is because it's all over the board. That's my biggest problem. If I think you have to narrow it. However, if you narrowed it, you wouldn't have to call it parental alienation. Just call it whatever it's narrowed to.
You could say the same thing
So,
about the term abuse. I mean,
right.
what
Well,
what's
physical
considered abuse?
abuse.
I mean, there's physical, mental,
Right. Well,
psychological,
I
verbal.
agree. You have to be more specific than physical abuse than
Hmm.
abuse. And I also agree. Physical abuse is pretty specific. You are hitting the other person or committing violence, like my ex-girlfriend pulling a knife on me. That's a form of physical abuse. But sexual abuse, you're raping or unwanted sex. Emotional and psychological abuse, I agree. That's whatever you want it to be. I yelled at you, it's emotional abuse. Yeah, you ignore me, that's emotional abuse. Everything becomes emotional abuse. But so you should be specific about what kind of abuse. I agree with
Would
that.
you
But
consider it? Well, if you're keeping a child away from a parent, especially in their most important developmental years, would you
mhm,
consider that child abuse?
I maybe, but I would if I would just say my ex-wife is keeping our son away and it's 6 months and it's stunting his development. I don't know why it needs to be labeled. I would rather people not label because the label has this nebulous meaning. uh,
It's
I, I don't I
per
don't think that
capita, we
if
probably
number
have the
one,
most
how
label
long did that
makers in
take?
the world, you know?
Right, but how long did that take? Like 5 seconds to explain it? I mean, what do you lose?
Mhm.
4 seconds in your life? If you explain it as opposed to saying it's child abuse. So, and look, if you go to court without labeling it, and you don't think an objective court is gonna take judicial notice? You haven't seen your son in 6 months. Like you got to have the label in order for the judge to go, oh, well, now I better make sure to address this.
Yes, the
Yeah,
problem here is this, Mike,
yeah.
Mhm.
and both Mikes. The definition of the term, like it's a Rorschach, is parental alienation. Like the layperson says, I feel alienated. Albert
Mhm.
Einstein said he felt alienated. You know,
Mhm.
but there's two terms of art that are used both in the medical or clinical sense and then in the legal sense. Okay, and in the medical clinical sense, parental alienation is not a DSM-5 recognized disorder. However, its proponents say that 5 or 6 of the characteristics of parental alienation are present in the DSM. And the argument therefore follows if there was a pill for parental alienation that the drug companies could sell to make money off of it as a syndrome or a diagnosis, it would be in there tomorrow because it has the basis there. It's a political decision not to include it in the DSM. The other part is the legal term. The legal term is divorced from the medical term in the sense that you have all these legal statements, like in states like Connecticut, where parental be taken out of the lexicon and coercive control or some other equally loaded term is placed in the lexicon for family court purposes.
I think
Standard in family court. You should not be able to summarily exclude medical evidence or summarily put in medical evidence. If a doctor can come in or an expert can come in and make the case under the Daubert standard that parental alienation exists, which I think will be very hard to do, but if they can do it, then that should be allowed in. And if it's not, it shouldn't be allowed in. Legislatures, I don't think, should be in the business of defining coercive control, defining parental alienation, defining these terms. It's already defined under Daubert. Leave it to the experts. Now, when you take it to a logical extreme, though, and I think I agree with you on this, Mike Volpe, about reunification camps and other things that are based on parental alienation philosophy or parental alienation science, things like that go a little bit too far. That's where you can go to certain types of therapy that's not actual family therapy, that's shock therapy, that's kidnapping therapy, that's based on radical reunification. That's where we start to get to the point where it becomes a big, big problem.
Right. And here, first of all, if you might feel alienated, it's not my place to tell you how to feel. So if you're like, when I feel alienated from my son, I would never say, stop feeling that way. There's a great Everybody Loves Raymond episode where that's the theme of the episode, that Ray keeps telling Deborah how to feel. You should never do that. So that's number one. Number two, if it's just a layman's term, I wouldn't be arguing with anyone. If you, in a layman's sense, I'm the victim of parental alienation, I wouldn't care. The problem, and it goes from it's whatever you want it to be to it's used as a psychological term and a legal term and sometimes a layman's term in court. And then it's a huge problem because it's whatever you want it to be. So it's very subjective. So everyone comes in.
Isn't that what judges do?
Right. Well,
judges make cases to be whatever they want to be.
Right. Well, don't give them more reason. I think as a say, it's a bogus psychological term.
Well, it comes to. Sorry, I didn't mean to butt over. It comes to like an accessibility issue, though, is that, yeah, there's layman terms. I think parental alienation, as a layman term, it's a catch-all. But then you have to differentiate. When you do go into court, you do got to understand the legal terms for your particular jurisdiction, or otherwise you're going to look like a fool. But then most people representing themselves, and even those that do have an attorney, I mean, you go into the system, you don't have a clue about the legal system. You're just seeing what you read on blogs, that's your knowledge. And so if all you see is parental alienation, that's the first term that gets ingrained in your mind. So that's one problem, is being able to educate people from the start, entering into the court system. But then the other problem is, unless you're somebody that gets really consumed with this and you know where to look, you don't have the first clue how to figure out how to go into the court system. One of the cases I've been writing about is a gentleman in South Carolina, and he's a mechanic. Very smart guy, very intelligent, that we could talk politics, but when it comes to procedures, terminology, how to file a motion, like, he doesn't have the first clue, because he fixes machines. He's a mechanic. He works on motors and generators. And when you don't have to deal with writing documents, like for me, my background's an IT consultant. I worked in the federal space, very documentation heavy. And so when I first became self-represented, I had that background for research, writing documents, and I could create 100 motions in a day if I had to, furthered by the fact, like, having these AI tools. But as a mechanic, as a waiter, Think of any kind of like an underwater welder. I don't know, just make up anything. None of these people are at a
Firefighter.
computer every day. They don't
Right.
understand documentation. They don't have in their mind legal procedures. And so when they enter the
But
courts,
that's
they're at a
the,
major
I
disadvantage.
agree that presents a problem
Mm.
for the litigant, but isn't there a separate problem that the court is creating by having this term be so vague that anyone can walk in and just say, my ex-wife wears blue all the time, and my son hates blue, and now I'm alienated. I covered Julie Goffstein. This is a great example. She and her now ex-husband were Orthodox Jews, 6 sons, all Orthodox Jews. He suddenly decides he wants to be Christian, and he goes to the rest of the family, let's all be Christian. And I go, no, we're going to be Orthodox Jews. And he goes, oh, I was alienated, and it worked. If you can use that and say parental alienation, I mean, come on.
Mike, I think the
My,
answer was given really a good start to the answer, at least by Senator Fincham out in Arizona. He said the family court should be doing two things: making a determination about property in divorce and making a determination about custody. They're not here to fix people, and they're not here to do anything other than those two things. Cut away all the bullshit at the end of the day. Do what we're constitutionally supposed to do. Give people their civil rights and keep government out of people's lives. I think that is the answer to parental alienation, coercive control, and this whole bogged down nature of things. I really do.
yeah, if you're not following a court order, enforce it. Stop
Right.
allowing all
And-
the
Don't go
and listen, I hate
on a fishing expedition in family court to hire
Right.
more people, to hire more experts, to hire more court appointed. Do two
right.
things
Look, and the term, and let me get this.
and property. That's it.
Right, let me get this article up. And the term is used by the court to appoint a whole bunch of people. So once you get parental alienation as like the allegation, it gives the court all the rope it needs to get this guy, that guy, that guy, and that guy. I think in this article, Sonny Kelly had 12. She was accused of parental alienation. Susan Skip had like 7 people appointed, that is. And once the accusation is there, it gives the court all the license it needs. And I want to mention, I dislike coercive control, the term, almost as much. As I said, control is coercive, so I don't know what that means. Coercive control, yeah, there are controlling people. I dated one of them. I don't, is it like double secret probation controlling? Is that coercive control? What is the difference between a controlling person, we've already recognized that, and coercive control? I don't know. And it's the same thing. Whatever the person did, that's coercive control, and it's going to be misused just as much. I would rather people go into court and say what happened as opposed to saying parental alienation. That's what I would rather people do. I think this term is misused, it's misapplied, and it creates all kinds of horrendous situations because abusers, among others, are using it. Dave Segui, who was accused, his ex-wife was molesting kids. Kent Gerard, his ex-wife, was molesting the kids, among other things, and accused him of parental alienation. It is mostly used by men against women. But we don't really disagree that much. And right. I wasn't there, so I'm not in a position to say you're not telling the truth, but
I'm offended. No.
Right. So being kept away from your son is not cool. And I do agree,
No.
If you're kept away long enough, what is he supposed to think? Obviously, that's alienating. So of course, at some point, he's thinking that you don't want to be with him. The process is alienating. But as I said, is that parental alienation? I don't know, because I don't know what parental alienation is.
It goes back to Rich saying that it's not, it's not in the DSM-5, and neither is complex PTSD, but but it's recognized in the UK. They recognize complex PTSD, but it's not recognized in the US. So why is that? But this is an issue of different standards and different jurisdictions, different terminologies. Somebody needs to make an attempt to come up with a unified, whether it's the DSM-5 or something else. Like, somebody needs to make an attempt Granted, it's still going to be by jurisdiction to decide what they want to claim is coercive control or parental alienation. But a lot of times these terms, I mean, they get used because it's like, imagine a flash flood happens and you're in a panic and you only get swept away and you grab onto the first thing you can. If it's a light pole, you're grabbing onto it for dear life. And when you get into family law and family court and just how traumatic it is, um, you hear certain terminology, you're grabbing onto it for dear life. It's not always intentional that you're trying
I'm
to use
not,
dumb
I'm not,
terminology,
I'm
but
not
it comes
necessarily, but I'm not necessarily blaming the parents.
right.
But I also think that you grab on the way you just
It's a
described pretty
systemic
eloquently.
issue.
Right, but the reason you're grabbing on is because it's so vague that
Yeah.
oh yeah, that's what I'm going through because it's such a vague term. Everybody thinks they're going through
But
it.
I think it's also part of the trauma that somebody keeps repeating it. It's like
Right,
ingrained in your head, and you just repeat it. It's like parental alienation, parental alienation, parental alienation. And it's like, all right, buddy, stop. You're driving me nuts. And it's like
right,
the only word you can repeat because it's
right.
like just pounded in your head, and
Mhm.
and that's what you relate to. And then that gets into when when you asked about PTSD. I mean, I think for me, it makes me think of complex PTSD that needs to be recognized in the US. And
But
it also
isn't
needs to be,
PTSD, that's another issue? Isn't it complex? What does that mean? Is that like double secret probation PTSD?
well,
How is that
PTSD,
different from PTSD? PTSD is complex. Like,
well, I think it's differentiating between PTSD from a physical incident like a bomb going off and when you're at war or being in a car accident, hitting your head, something more relating to also a TBI, but then complex PTSD being more
a traumatic
mental,
process.
like a traumatic process, something very
All right.
repetitive,
Okay.
something you can't.
Well, see that's specific, and that's something that people can understand, and they can see exactly when, or at least very close to exactly when it's complex PTSD, as
So when
opposed to
you're in a case with
PTSD. And I
here,
still, that's different than parental alienation. As I don't,
yeah.
I'm not attacking the people who feel alienated. I'm attacking the term. I don't like the term. I want it to go away. I think it hurts a lot of people because it's so easy to misuse. I think you'd agree. It's very easy to misuse.
I think it's definitely easy to be manipulated or taken
Right.
advantage of, used incorrectly, and that's why I brought up Kleenex and tissues because
Yeah.
Kleenex is it's
A form.
trademarked. So when
You
somebody says, "Oh,
brand of
pass me
tissue.
a Kleenex,"
Right.
you're saying, "Okay, pass me a brand."
Right.
Um, you're saying, "Oh, it's parental alienation." It's essentially more of like a branded term instead of like a factual
Mhm.
term, and people just don't understand the term enough and how they're using it.
Mhm. I
It's like, oh, I got a pair
definitely
of
agree with
Nikes,
that.
and
Rich, anything you wanted to add? And then I think we got to end it. We've been going for about.
I think that it goes back to the story about parental alienation, and I think when Gardner introduced the parental alienation syndrome, it was right in line with that Kramer versus Kramer explosion in the '80s, where it started to become the divorced industrial complex. And I think that the problems that many perceive about Gardner, and some people perceive as Gardner was great, but the fact is, when you the problems there are in line with the explosion of the family courts, and I think that we have to get back to the what they're talking about in Arizona. Two
Mhm.
simple determinations, custody and property, and we're not in the
And
business of fixing people.
stick to the facts as opposed to
And
what an
all this issues,
expert
this entire
perceives.
fight, this entire father's rights versus mother's rights, protected fathers, protected mothers, protected parents, this, that, the other thing, alienators, is a byproduct of that '80s explosion that we saw. And I think we're at the time where the pendulum is swinging back as a matter of law, as a matter of policy. I think we have to put this genie back in the bottle to the extent that we can. Get rid of the feeding trough, rein in the trial lawyers, rein in the court appointeds, and actually hold judges and accountable. Get rid of guardian ad litems or limit their use. Get rid of guardian ad litem immunity. Do the adjudicative and legal things that could do with that people can get a fair shake. And they're going to court. They know they're getting two things. They're getting a determination about their property, and they're getting a determination about their custody. And
Yeah.
that's
that's,
it.
that's very
Get rid
simple.
of ADR, get rid of ADR, undo the, what was it, the 1990 Judicial Improvement Act that put in, ADR, and go back.
Title 4B, Title 4D, Title 4E,
Yeah,
all this other stuff. You know, there seems
Have
to be
a father and dog
conservative
office.
safety net. I agree, but it's there. Violence Against Women Act. It's all there as another feeding trough. So they get
right.
private people as part of the feeding trough. They get public money as part of the feeding trough. Cut it off. And we're at a point in history right now where it's a possibility under this administration for there to be some change. I think that if the ship sails, we're looking at another 20 years and another 20 years of misery for everybody. It's going to get even worse.
Mike, your
Until
last
Barron
word.
Trump becomes president, right?
Right. Your last word. Anything?
The Adventures of Barron Trump. That's right.
Yeah.
Anything?
I don't know. Nip Hop football rules. No, just last words is and I wish we could do more to try to get from the start and help people. I think as we've seen that this parental rights community is fairly fractured. There's a lot of people that really just stick in their own silos. But if there's a way that we can get more people to join together and think from how we can attack from even the start so that parents aren't left in the dust or they're not humiliated because they stick to a term like parental alienation. Help them understand these terms. Help them understand that they don't always need to pay thousands and thousands of dollars to an attorney. They can do things themselves. That there's a lot more we could do as a community to work together. And also, yeah, go to thunderreport.org and you can find my contact information there if you want me to write some stories. Sorry, not trying to steal any business from you guys, but maybe we can all collaborate together on something.
Anytime, and I agree with you, but I think the forces for reform, they have the momentum. So it's fractured because people do have their own biases and things that they care about. So you're never going to get consensus, but the forces for reform are definitely have the wind at their sails. What's happening in Arizona is just one example. There's laws being proposed all over the country. The amount of coverage of this is exponentially larger than a few years ago. So I think we're making progress, but it's not a movie. It's not going to happen overnight. So
and
it's
it takes
happening
more
at the
people like
pace.
Jeff to speak up.
Right. All right. Thanks, guys, for being here.